Into Zephyr's spring. When I was a kid having nightmares, my mom told me once after I woke screaming that if I was ever frightened, I should think about how I got to where I was. What was the last thing that I remembered? If I couldn't remember how I came to be in the place that I was, she said that meant I was dreaming. At some point in my life, I remember thinking, what if I open my eyes and I am somewhere where I wasn't when I last closed them? Does that meet the same conditions for that of dreaming, or is it somehow different? Throughout my life, I've learned that nuance is important, but did she know that? Take this moment for example. My eyes are open. I am somewhere where I wasn't before my eyes last closed. Am I dreaming? How did I get here? I can't think straight. My head is foggy. I think I walked? I may have taken a train. Or was it both? I walked to a train, I got on, and I walked here. Yeah, that sounds right, but when was the last time my eyes were open? I just can't remember. But doesn't one need to see in order to board a train, in order to walk to a destination? I suppose not necessarily. At least I know what is in front of me. There is a house. It is the kind of house that you would see in a drawing. A plump rectangle with a triangle on top, a door in the front, a window with a panel in the shape of a cross. It is a house that my son could have drawn, my little boy. I have a little boy. I almost forgot. How could I have forgotten? There are flowers outside, resting among the blades of green grass. They are sunflowers. Each have exactly 5 yellow petals, a dark brown center, and 2 leaves pointing outwards at about halfway up their stems. I must be dreaming. This must be something that my son showed me, something that he drew. Look, Daddy, he must have said. Look what I have drawn. I just can't remember. But wait, would he have drawn the flowers this way? They are just as I described, but also sloping to the side. 2 clusters of flowers are sloping left, 2 clusters are sloping right. They are sad flowers. My son is not sad. A zephyr wobbles the blades of grass and the flowers alike, causing me to shiver and also to look up, where my gaze is now met, despite my intuition informing me of its impossibility, with a long, serpentine dragon flying above the house and amidst the clouds. Where did my son learn to draw a dragon of such detail? It's uncanny. The blue of its scales looks so real, almost like feathers. It has a white mane like a lion, with similar tufts of fur also. Its talons are silver and sharp-looking, but even from here I can see the detail of them, as if they were coated by the enamel of my own teeth. I must be dreaming. So I remark aloud, wake up, old Big Al. You are dreaming, and it is a sad dream, because the house within it is sad, and this dragon somehow is sad also, or solemn at least, for dragons are one with nature, and this breeze and these clouds which dim the sun and these flowers and this lonely house all point in the same direction, and that is the direction of the melancholy. But what is its purpose, this place? At some point I left my house. I remember doing this better now. The inner fog is lifting slightly. I walked to the train station. I bought a ticket for this destination, for this place. I walked from the train's destination and now I'm here. My eyes were closed and now they are open. I cannot tell you why I had them closed, cannot tell you why I didn't need them to buy the ticket or to board the train or to walk here. But here I am, and I can see that I am in this melancholy place, and I can't figure out why this place is the way that it is, even if that matters. Then again, why is it that I believe with conviction that first, this place does matter, and second, that it is in fact a lonely place? After all, I haven't been inside the house which resides below these clouds and below this soaring dragon and amongst these melancholy flowers. Maybe I should go inside and take a look around, then. Put my theory to the test. How else shall I know for certain that this place is what I think it is? Really, Big Al, can you so easily judge a book by its cover? So easily judge a house solely based on its surroundings, its simplicity, its lack of a porch? So now I'm inside, and the first knowledge I am gifted is the tenet that this is no ordinary house. There is a thick gray steam everywhere, for one. How odd is that? With the front door closed behind me, I squint past the steam to gather my bearings. only able to see at all due to a set of fluorescent lights above me that are aided only slightly by the dim light which comes in through the window positioned near the entrance. The second thing I notice about the inside of the house is the bizarre architecture before me. That is, I notice that upon entering, I am standing in the center of a hallway, but not one that runs longitudinally, as one might expect from a typical home which might have an architecture that would facilitate a direct path into its earliest dwelling, whether that be the living or dining room, the kitchen, or even a series of bedrooms, as long as it were presented straightforwardly, allowing for the customary, if contradictory, implication that humans are known as beings who move along in such a straightforward manner to manifest itself, thereby granting any newcomer with a sense of familiarity, despite the unknown, which says, "You are welcome here." But no, this hallway instead runs laterally, side to side, and it tells me something else entirely. You are out of your element here, this house says instead. Welcome to chaos. So I look left, I look right, I even look up. In all directions, the hallway extends farther than I ever would have guessed such a hallway possibly could after seeing the house in which it resides from the outside. And again, the steam is everywhere. Where am I to go? So I close my eyes. I'm listening, although I don't know what for. I'll admit that I'm afraid. After all, if this is a dream, it seems entirely possible to me that once my eyes reopen, they very well may reveal a completely different reality with an entirely new degree of uncertainty present before me. Perhaps one which could eclipse in its uncertainty, for things can always become less certain, even this steamy hallway in this so far strange home. But alas, curiosity of the sort that propels me toward either proving my theory of dreaming or leaving me yet unsettled causes me to once again open my eyes after deciding that I will choose arbitrarily, for after all, what other manner do I have to choose? Whether I will go left or right in this hallway that, for all I can tell, exists around me no different than it did before I closed my eyes. So I walk left, for no particular reason, towards the end of the hallway where an opening unveils itself, passing only a few paintings, asking that I take a right turn to enter into a space which is even steamier than the first. It's hard to see through the heavier steam in the new room. I'm a bit irritated, honestly. One can only withstand so much obscurity. But slowly, my eyes are yet again adjusting. As they do, I notice that I'm in a room with metal benches only as tall as my shins spattered throughout. There are windows which let in the dim light from outside, but no lights. Over to the right, the steam is particularly thick. Actually, that seems to be where it's all coming from. I hear running water. It's as if I've walked into a bathhouse or something of the sort. The locker room of the local pool, maybe, just like the one that I used to take my son to when he was small and we lived together back in our old home. Because just beyond an opening, I see a series of shower heads spraying steaming hot water onto a tile floor. What a waste! There are no people under those shower heads, so why are they turned on? I walk over to the opening and peek around the wall, only to find that there are more than 10 shower heads, all of which are blasting at full force. I hear a grumbling, so I turn around. An old, round, and pruning man, whom I somehow overlooked upon entering, is sitting on one of the benches in the corner of the room, clothed only by a small white towel wrapped around his waist. I walk over to him a bit skittishly. I figure this could be his house that I uninvitedly waltzed into after all. "Hello, sir," I say. "Terribly sorry to bother you, but I stop. What exactly? It isn't as though I know my reason for having come here in the first place, let alone my reason for having walked into a house whose owner I don't even know. Well, I continue, trying to be as polite as possible, would you mind if I asked if you were the master of this place? He doesn't answer. I walk a little closer, even more tentatively now. Sir? He turns his head slowly towards me, but all I get is a muffled ugh before he turns his head back towards the floor. His face looks so remarkably familiar, yet I can't quite discern why that is. I wait for a moment, step back and away, then forward again. The floor is moist and sticky, almost soft. I look at the man and then away again. All he does is sit and heave his chest for breath. I want to see his face one more time, see if I can recognize it, but I'm beginning to think that he won't be showing it to me again. I'm starting to hear something now. Something besides the shower heads. Since the old man seems to be unresponsive to anything I do anyways, I decide to investigate the sound, which seems to be that of, perhaps, splashing? As I further myself through the dim and musky shower room, leaving the old man behind, I find another opening, which leads to another hallway. The steam has yet to dissipate. I fully expect, upon rounding this corner, to find but a public pool. For what else could a place with a room like the one behind me be? Only in the very depths of my mind do I remember that this place I had once walked into seemed from the outside only, and so clearly so, to be a normal house. The epitome of a normal house, in fact. I'm aware of this, but I suppose reality can be so alluring in its persuasion that keeping suspicions about its veracity at the forefront of the mind is difficult. But while the new room I now find myself in is similar, in a sense, to that of a public pool, the sounds of splashing in water in the room prior dare to make a fool of me, for now, without question, although I still wonder how it could possibly be the case, I'm in the presence of an enclosed hot spring, one which is steaming fervently, but devoid of people, leaving me still wondering where the sounds of splashing in water had come from. In this new room there are plants everywhere. Ferns sprawl across the floor. Vines beginning at the base of the walls aspire to reach the ceiling, and are nearly succeeding. Particularly large lily pads and general green life is abundant. The pool itself is incredibly large, particularly when one considers the size of the place I walked into still only moments prior, which at this point, it has to be fair to say, need have been some sort of illusion, for its size perceived from within is clearly many times larger than that of its size perceived from without. It must be at least 100 feet in diameter, with a depth I don't even want to begin to ponder at this pool, for its floor is dark and discolored, and considering such a thing would only frighten me, as I've always been afraid of deep water. Again, the steam is plentiful. I can't say this enough. I could see it rising from the pool like spirits from a grave. By now, too, I've begun to feel the heaviness of it. Droplets of sweat are clinging to my forehead, and my clothes feel one with my body. The room itself, which I assume must have been built around the perimeter of the spring, is spacious. The walls, save the ones directly behind me, are far from me in every direction, and the ceiling is so tall that the steam and general dimness of the lighting keep me from seeing where it ends. There's a substantial stone terrace along the far side of the pool, which looks as though it may extend past the two walls which abut it. Throughout the pool there are rock faces which protrude slightly from the surface and reach, presumably, to the floor. The green life is also present on the rocks, whether it be in the form of moss, vines, or tiny sprouts. In a place like this, is it even possible to gather information for a hypothesis about whether or not I'm dreaming? It's more surreal than real, that's for sure, but is that enough from which to extract the certainty I'm seeking? It is a simple fact, after all, that reality itself is often surreal, that the strangest thing that could happen often does happen, and with much more frequency than anyone would often imagine. I'm beginning to doubt myself now. The steam is just so thick, so warm, so moist. I can smell the humidity in the air. The dread that the depth of the pool produces for me feels so real because the visually discernible qualities of this place are so detailed. I can see the ripples in the water and the texture in the rock face. I can hear the now faint sound of the shower heads spewing behind me, and the quietness, for lack of sound is also something to hear, of the pool. What other measures of observation do I have? I squat down to the floor and feel around with the tips of my fingers. Under the plant life is dirt and rock. It's wet. It's real feeling. The only proof I have that this reality is fictitious in the first place is... what exactly? Because at one time I closed my eyes, and when I opened them I was standing before a house? Because that house was small and looked like a picturesque illustration, like the symbol for a house rather than a house itself? What if perhaps I simply don't remember what the inside of the train that I took to get here looked like? What if, being distracted by the great detail of the dragon as it soared above it all, I simply misunderstood just how large this house really was, simply mismanaged its particularities in my mind? Isn't it only a fool whose first reaction to a surreal occurrence in their life is to question whether or not they are dreaming anyways? And maybe not only to question, but to search for the answer, no matter what train one has to take to get there, no matter whose house one has to uninvitedly waltz into, and no matter how much probing one has to do amidst a sea of literal fog? Isn't it the case that these things are unproductive to the real question at hand, the question that is always asked by someone who is lost, which contemplates what is real and what is not, while before them real uncertainty, real chaos, unravels itself only further and further? For example, I now wonder what it would actually take to get to the bottom of my question. Would it be at the floor of this hot spring? Or if I were to venture down into the water before me, would the domain housing the answer to the questions I seek, and therefore the domain of possibilities, only expand further? And if I began a journey to the bottom of the pool and it was as deep as I imagine, how would I breathe or again reach the surface? And just how far down would I have to swim exactly? Would it even be possible to reach the bottom? Answers to questions, and presumably the knowledge that comes with them, are generally good. But nuance is important. If every answer I get, if every room I enter, only leads to more complexity, more uncertainty, and more chaos, I'm not even sure I want to know what is happening. Perhaps I should turn around and run as fast as I can, escaping to certainty. But, yes, surely I do, and surely I must take this path. I must know the answers to the questions I'm proposing, even if it is only the one answer to the one question of, is this real? I must know. I must know if my son drew this sad house and the sad flowers out in front of it, and why the memory of such a drawing would be significant to the degree that I would dream about it so fervently. And if I'm not dreaming, then I must know why I'm here. There has to be some reason for it all. But contemporarily, there comes to mind a more immediate question, and that is, why is it that I believe the answers to all my previous woes, all my previous inquiries, and all my foregone internal ramblings lay at the bottom of this pool? It is a sudden urge. I was brainstorming before, but if someone had asked me a moment ago whether or not I actually thought that all the answers to my most burning desires could be found at the bottom of a hot spring, I may have scoffed. But if they asked me right now, I would tell them that I'm sure of it. The answers are down there. My mind and soul are already moving to jump into the pool with post-haste. Only my body has not budged. Suddenly, a deep voice, which seems to erupt from everywhere, says to me,
"Maybe you should be the one with the answers for once."
I turn around, thinking instinctively that perhaps the old man from the shower had come out to finally speak with me, but I see no one. In fact, the hallway that I had once used to enter the room I currently reside in is nowhere to be seen, was simply a continuation of the unanimous walls which border my current reality in its place.
It is much easier to pose the questions than it is to solve the problems.
The voice speaks again. "Where are you?" I say, looking around.
More questions. At least ask them properly. Who, not where.
But before I can ask the apparent question, a different voice, this time one light and familiar, is calling out to me from an identifiable locus, much different from the latter voice which spoke from everywhere. "Are you lost, Big Al?" I focus my attention to the locale of the voice, just to my right, where I find someone that I recognize with utmost familiarity. It is my ex-wife, mother of my child, standing in the corner of the room and holding open a door in a pink satin silk dress, which, closed and from the side of the wall, would be unnoticeable. "Were you looking for me, or just talking to yourself?" she asks, but I don't answer, mostly because I'm struck. What is she doing here? But I don't ask her that question either, I think because that ominous voice may have gotten to me. "Well," she continues, "come here." Then she begins to walk back through the door whence she came. I follow her. She is prompting me to sit on a small tree stump in the corner of the room by waving her hands. "Have a seat. We had to cut that tree down before it got too big. That damn pool. The overgrowth is unavoidable, but we may as well make the most of it." The stump is lumpy and dry, and also out of place. The room we currently preside in is similar to the room I visited prior to the room with the pool, White walls and floors, no windows, some synthetic lighting, but with the one noticeable and important distinction of being devoid of any steam. In fact, it's so strange that it's here in the first place. But I can make do. In the meantime, my ex-wife is propping herself up onto a blue medical chair, a bit awkwardly, I might add, while the accompanying reusable paper sheet crinkles under her weight. Having placed herself in a suitable position, she fixes her dress around her knees, then crosses her hands atop her sphered belly. She is clearly pregnant. Thinking along the lines of this reality being no more than a dream, I ask her, nodding at her swollen belly, "Is that James?" "Very funny, silly. James has already been born," she says. "This is my little girl. Marcus and I haven't decided on a name yet. Personally, I'm partial to Molly. What do you think?" "Who's Marcus?" I say. "Who's Marcus? Well, he's my husband, of course. Marcus Strand. Are you feeling all right, Big Al?" I'd be feeling better if I had some answers to some questions, if I knew what was going on here exactly. But I don't say that to her. "We're expecting in just a few months. Isn't that exciting? Do you think James will be happy to meet his little sister? I've always thought that he'd like to have a brother, but I'm sure he'll love his sister just the same." Oddly, the musk of the steam is nowhere to be found, but the sweat rolling down my face has seemed to only increase. It's just so warm in this little room. Stuffy, I'd say. She's noticed it too. "Oh, you poor thing." As she says this, she simultaneously hops back onto the ground where she walks over to a desk in the corner and retrieves a rag. Now she's patting my face with it. There we go. That's better. You're in some sort of way right now, aren't you, darling?" To hell with it. I'm just going to ask her. "Am I dreaming?" I say. She's paused now, just holding the rag a few inches from my face. She wrinkles her nose, then stands up, rag in one hand, hip in the other. She's looking at me like a child who's asked where his babies come from for the first time. "Isn't that some question?" she says. She walks over to the medical chair again and props herself back on top, setting the damp rag to the side. "I don't have the answer you're looking for, but let me ask you this. Does someone who's awake ever ask whether or not they're dreaming?" I'm taking in her question. She's right. No, they don't. If I were awake, I'd know it. If I were awake, there would be no question in my mind. Unless... Well? She follows up. "No, I guess you're right. I must be dreaming. Otherwise I wouldn't be wondering such a question in the first place." "See, you answered your question yourself. You didn't need me." She's snickering. She's as playful as I remember when we were first dating. "It's too bad, though," she says, mid-giggle, her fingers touching her lips. "You'll probably wake soon, given that you've gotten that you wanted and all. But there's so much more for you here." "There's so much more for me where?" I ask. "In this house, silly. Don't you remember?" "What is there to remember? Wait, have I been here before? That voice. Did you hear a voice? Is there someone out there? Something out there?" I'm questioning myself again. I had thought this was an entirely new place, an experience entirely new. The steam is gone, but my head is still foggy. If only I was a bit more lucid. And that voice. Who, not where. Maybe if I was just awake. If I'm not already, but wait, something else has come to mind. "Where's James?" I say. She looks less startled by this question. She's smiling. But just as though she's about to speak, something has interrupted us. There is a knocking at the door behind her, one different from the one we used to enter this room. We both turn to look. The outline of a person's head appears in a small, only partially translucent window towards the top of the door. From the other side, a woman's voice says loudly and in between overzealous knocking, "Miss Strand, It's time for your ultrasound. My ex-wife looks suddenly startled. Oh, I'm sorry, Big Al. I've got to go. Right now? I ask. Miss Strand? Yes, right now. I'm sorry. You have to go too. Miss Strand, are you there? The knocking is still going. My ex-wife has opened the secret door within the wall again. Steam is flooding in, and she's rushing me out. Go on, she says. Wait, I say. James, you know where James is, darling. He's in this house. Find him. All of your answers are here. Miss Strand, don't make me come in there. I'll get your husband. The voice on the other side of the door continues. Goodbye, darling, my ex-wife says, and shuts the door in my face. Before me is a wall covered in green vines, and of course, steam.